Hey, I made one of these last year, so I'm doing it again this year. And actually near the end of the year this time, unlike 4 months after like I did last year's. Before we get into the top 10, I'll start with some honorable mentions. I have a lot this year, so I'll be moving through all of them quickly. Your Boy Sponges After the Show. This album is a SpongeBob themed hip hop album. I'm not sure how good it actually is, but it's extremely funny and novel to me. Grand Belial's Keys, Conic Charmers. 17 years after their last album, and it sounds like they never left. It's just your great black and heavy metal sound of Grand Belial's Key. Absent in Body's Plague God, a very spooky and scary sounding sludge album. It just has really good atmosphere and I find it really cool. Next is Richard Dawson's The Ruby Chord. Richard Dawson is my favorite folk artist, and this album is just another fantastic release by him. It's definitely his most poetic album to date, and if The Hermit was just a bit shorter, like the intro and outro were cut a bit, it might have actually made the full list. Next is Glavgod's Glavund. No idea if that's how you pronounce it. It's probably not. But this is a very interesting mixture of funeral doom and black metal. The only flaw is that I think it has maybe just a few too many samples. Bo Burnham's The Inside Outtakes, a collection of bonus songs that didn't make it into last year's Inside album. This album lacks the serious commentary that Inside had, but in its place is extremely funny, and it has made me laugh through just about every single listen. Peronul's White Ceiling Black Dots Wandering Around. Like the last mention, this is some extra songs and demos that didn't make Peronul's last year album to see the next part of the dream. These songs are just as good as that of the ones that made the final cut, so if you liked that album, you really need to check this one out too. Next, Creator's Hate Uberatus. This album kicks ass, and it's nice to see that an old band as Creator can still make great albums. Summerland's Dream Killer. It's just a very epic and grand power metal album. One of the best power metal albums of the year, but not as quite as good as the one that made the list. Next is Ara's Thanos. It's just a short 2-song black metal EP, but it goes very hard and it's just fantastic. These albums didn't quite make the top 10, but they're definitely worth checking out. And now, so into the main list. This is a random Metalhead's top 10 albums of 2022. Number 10, Melonius Consume You by Wellbather. This is the debut album by Wellbather, and it's fantastic. This is an absolutely relentless black metal album. If you saw my last year's list, then I think it will be no surprise this album made the list. From the beginning to end is no stopping absolute destruction on your eardrums. I can't wait to see what he releases next. Number 9, The War to End All Wars by Sabaton. I think this new Sabaton album is one of the best that the band has ever released. It has the great war-themed lyrics that all Sabaton songs are about, and it brings these extremely patriotic and motivating singing alongside it, with these triumphant instrumentation in the background. It really makes World War I seem like some grand opera, and when I listen to this album, I'm singing along just about every single song, except maybe the last one. That one's a bit stinky. Number 8, Iron Shackles by Luzifer. The dawn is breathing dry. They're lusting for your life. Avoid all whispers, trust no sound. Danger screaming all around. Avoid all whispers, trust no sound. When there is vodka upon the barrel downs. Avoid all whispers, trust no sound. debut album brings a lot of traditional heavy metal sound and adds a lot of power metal elements. I think this is what Judas Priest would sound like if they were a power metal band. This album is absolutely filled with epic and catchy songs. I can find myself even singing along with the songs during German, which is a language I don't speak. The fantasy-themed lyrics add a lot in making this album fun as well. Number 7, Together by Duster. Legendary slowcore band Duster is back, and starting my take on this album with an unpopular opinion, this is my favorite Duster album. It's an extremely depressing slowcore album, both instrumentally and lyrically. The simple, repetitive instrumentation mixed with the muttered vocals really makes it feel like these songs are a struggle to keep going. This album, I feel, is a lot more straightforward and coherent than their earlier work, which is what I want out of a depressive album. Number 6, Ynglingaättens by Månegarm. Again, forgive my pronunciation. The new album by Viking metal big shots, Månegarm, and we see it bring a more straightforward black metal sound, but we also see more very strong folk passages and a lot more clean singing than their earlier work, which I like to see. This album has a very strong Vinder vibes, so if you love Vinder as much as I do, this album should be right up your alley as well. Number 5, Cave Road by Viagra Boys.
He don't believe in science. He thinks that all the news is fake. And late at night he sits on his computer and writes about the things he hates. But if it was a million years ago and we were still living in caves, you would not be welcomed by the other apes, 'cause you were both a bit too late. You ain't no ape, you're a troglodyte.
This new Viagra Boys album is a very interesting mixture of punk and electronic music. It is simultaneously very funny and also brings up interesting points about the lunacy of conspiracy theories, but also its disorders such as ADD. It is a very sarcastic and amusing album, and it's hard to not have a good time while listening to it. Number 4, Crocodile Moat by Curta'n Wall. This is the most fun album I have ever heard. Crocodile Moat is unapologetically silly and nerdy. It is just a crazy fun mixture of black metal and these fantasy-esque synth passages. Alongside that, the lyrics are goofy and over-the-top lines about knights and kings and castles, and this album just makes me so happy whenever I listen to it, just because of how fun it is. Number 3, Kinnery of Lupercalia, the Undelivered Legion by Munly and the Lupercalians.
Upon that goat, perched on a soapbox, he stares at me, and in his mouth is Yeshua's clothes. So I pin them to my skin.
Kinnery of Lupercalia, The Undelivered Legion is one of the most interesting albums I've heard this year. It's a mixture of country and folk, but that isn't what makes it interesting. This album is also very ominous and mysterious. Alongside the upbeat guitars, there's also these strange ritualistic percussion passages and these very creepy piano sections. Then the lyrics are also very mysterious and poetic. They have a lot of strange wordings, like when they reference the he, she. They are filled with a lot of religious references as well, and they have a lot of hateful atmosphere. I really have no idea what this album is about, but I feel like I'm listening to someone's ancient vendetta. Number 2, Hostile Architecture by Ashenspire.
Where are you, lion? Into what's the best goes your heart. The black depths I condemn ye, and raise up to heaven.
This album has some of the best lyrics I have ever heard, and top of that, the instrumentation is so weird and interesting. Lyrically, it is a cry of socialism. It talks about the abuse of the working class in very poetic ways, and the instrumentally, it is a very interesting mixture of black metal and band elements. All throughout this album, there are horns and strings alongside the harsh guitars and drummings. Now for the vocal delivery. The vocalist's screams are some of the most pained things I've ever heard. It is very impressive. This is the only album that almost usurped the number 1 pick, but it didn't quite do so, and so now into the number 1. Finally, number 1, Perfect Light by 40 Watt Sun.
Maybe I'm losing both of us. Tell me I'm not. Maybe our lives are tipping over.
It is no surprise that this is my number 1. When I first listened to it on its release, I immediately thought it was going to be number 1 of the year, and I still feel that way. Patrick Walker is easily my favorite artist. Watching from a Distance is my favorite album of all time, and I also give the 2016 album Wider Than the Sky a perfect score. This album brings the sound of the last album with more chamber and classical elements, but Patrick Walker yet again managed to make one of the most heart-wrenching albums I've ever heard. Many might think this album is boring and too repetitive, but I think that just adds to the depressive atmosphere. My favorite line of the album is that maybe I'm losing both of us, which I think hits really hard. So with this release, Patrick Walker managed to release yet another masterpiece. Well, that's it. Bye.